Hello and welcome to Time with PwC. Today we'll untie all the knots about taxes. Who will pay taxes and what forms of taxes we have. My guest is Mr. Abeku Gyan-Quansah. Abeku has almost 19 years working experience in the delivery of professional tax services. He is currently the PwC Ghana's business school leader and the indirect tax service leader for PwC Ghana in West Africa. His experience includes providing tax advisory and compliance services to clients in the consumer and industrial products, telecom, banking, energy, utilities, and resources industries. These clients have local and international presence with interest in Ghana, Sierra Leone, and the Gambia. He worked in Zambia for about 1.5 years. Abeku, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Sule.
Tell us, what are taxes?
All right, so Sule, once again, thank you so much for this invitation. And as you rightly said in your introduction, I've been doing tax for several years now. It's actually what I describe as a passion. I actually believe that for our common existence, we need a common point of finance, and that is where taxes comes in. So together as people, we can decide to say that we believe we must all say construct a road. The natural question that would come up is that how do we finance the road? Together as a people, we can tell ourselves that education is important. The natural question that should follow is that how do we finance that education? Together as a people, we say let us construct hospitals in order to ensure that when we are sick, it is not only the wealthy that would get medical services. How do we finance that public expenditure? We do that mainly through taxes. So in brief, taxes is nothing but a source of financing for common expenditure. And I believe the layman can appreciate this. So if I become a little bit more technical, and by becoming technical, I'm saying that I would now elevate the conversation a little bit to look at the laws. We have laws in Ghana that defines what taxes. But for the purpose of your show, tax is simply something that satisfies this criteria. One, there is a law asking you and I to pay it. And then two, that law is administered or partly administered by the Commissioner General of the Ghana Revenue Authority. So for the purpose of our conversation, whenever we talk about tax, let's answer these two questions. One, is there a tax law? Not just a paper lying somewhere. But we need to find ourselves, is there a law? Two, is that law administered by the Commissioner General? Once again, it is important that the average man understands our conversation. So we are saying that if there is a law, that law ordinarily should have been passed by Parliament. So when I go to Parliament, would I see that law there? If it's not directly passed by Parliament, has Parliament given that person who says there is a law requiring me to pay tax, given that person an authorization to do that through regulations? So in brief, whenever we talk about taxes, let's ask ourselves, is there a public good? Is there a public service that we generally think we must collectively finance? The question then arises, who finances that? And we're going to be financing that mainly by taxes. And whenever it comes to taxes, we must also answer two key questions. Is there a law? And who administers that law?
Well, Abeku, in a country where people are reluctant to pay, to comply with the law, even though there's an existing law, the authorities have difficulties implementing the law, and the citizens are also reluctant to comply with the law. How do we get a convergence where there is strict implementation of the law and the reluctance of the people to also abide by the law is also bridged so that we can get a convergence for the authority to ensure that the laws are complied with and the citizens are also willing to pay instead of that kind of like a physical attitude or reluctance to pay the law? How do we get them, all the two parties, the authorities and the citizens, to comply?
All right. So you're talking about people, not reluctantly complying.
Yeah.
The natural question is, why are they not complying? There could be several reasons why they are not complying, but I'm going to pick about one or two reasons why they may not be complying. The first is that some say we do not understand the tax laws.
Okay.
We do not understand what is required of us. So if that is a genuine reason why people are not complying, I am an advocate for simplifying the tax laws. However, there's a level beyond which you can always simplify something. If you simplify it too much, and if you're not careful, people will take advantage of those simplifications and also not comply. They will find a way of going around the law because it is so simple to go round. All right? So the first thing I would say is that why are the people not complying? Some of the publicly available reasons are that they claim that they do not understand. So as the authority, what are you doing to ensure that people can understand that law? Even for those who understand, a second popular reason that is given is that what are my taxes being used for? And I'll go back to the fundamentals. We all agree that there must be a common expenditure. We all agree that there are public goods. We all agree that in respect of that public good, public service, we must not pay commercial rates to support our collective interests.
Okay.
How do we finance it? We finance it through taxes. Now, if the people are now telling themselves that I have paid this thing, but I'm not seeing the value of the common good. So, for example, right in front of your building here, you have a bridge. When there was no bridge there, how was the traffic? What has the bridge done to ease the traffic? If the people believe that the monies they have paid is commensurate to the value that they are getting, that excuse to not comply will be minimized. And I keep using the word minimized because there are some people, whether the law is simple or whether there is value, they would not comply. So I said I was just going to give you two reasons. The reason why I want to give you two reasons is that, look, Sule, I believe that these conversations must be human. These conversations must be as simple as possible.
True.
So if the people are saying that we do not understand, it is government's role, to my mind, to try and make sure that the people understand by introducing laws that are easier to understand. And then the second thing is that if the people claim that they do not have value for the contribution that they are making, then is there a way by which we can demonstrate some value? So let me take you back into history. Somewhere during the early 2000s, you remember that this nation decided to go into HIPIC. And you remember that we constructed some public places. And they will write, by HIPIC.
Yeah, HIPIC
by
project.
HIPIC.
Yeah.
Can we begin when we do certain things, say, by VAT? Maybe that would get people a lot more interested. Will get people a lot more involved. And then maybe even though I said I was going to give you two reasons, the third one I would like to add is the political will to enforce. Let me pick a typical foreign-led company. If that company do not comply with taxes, I bet you the likelihood is that the revenue authority would go after them. Can we say the same about our public markets? The people say we wouldn't comply. How easy can you touch them? And when you touch them, at what political cost does it come? Am I begrudging the politician? Obviously not. The reason is that I speak taxes as a passion because that's what I do every day. The politician also does politics every day, and that is what they understand. So the measure of a politician's success, of course, there could be several measures. One of the measures is how many people voted for me. So if the politician is going to embark on something that would make his political fortunes go down, he will be a lot more calmer in doing that. So in brief, and to summarize, in response to your question of how, one, if people are arguing, if people are complaining that the tax laws are complicated, is there an extent to which we can simplify? And of course, I said that there is an extent beyond which you cannot simplify. Even it's about writing letters. So you write a letter to Miss Sule, I may read it in a particular way, different from the way your crew may even read that letter. So there's a limit to you can simplify. The second reason is, do people believe that they have value for their money? So if you look at the 2025 budget that we passed by Parliament, In one of the paragraphs that the Minister of Finance presented on behalf of the President, he talked about the fact that Ghanaians say that we are tired with paying all these taxes. You also cut down on expenditure. In other words, get the funds that I am using into valued places. So when somebody says cut down expenditure, the person is not necessarily saying cut down expenditure on what necessarily values all of us, but the person is actually saying that there are certain expenditure that you are incurring, we think you're not giving us value.
Yeah.
So how do we deal with that? And then last one, how do we ensure that when it comes to the enforcement, we properly enforce, of course, not losing sight of the fact that tax itself has political dimensions to it. And the politician will obviously be very careful to the extent to which it does it. So these reasons that I've just shared with you, what I call behind the envelope. Political will.
Value for money.
Yeah.
And then simplification of the tax laws.
Brilliant.
And then the willingness of the people themselves to pay those taxes after they've been after that awareness had been created.
Brilliant.
Great. So what are the types of taxes we have?
So whenever anybody asks me this question once again, they say, I don't like having those technical conversations. Let us bring it home. So let's even assume that, Sule, you are even not a Christian, but probably have Christian friends.
Yes.
They've probably invited you to a wedding in church, or they've invited you to a program in church. And I love using this explanation because the majority of us in Ghana are Christians.
Yes.
So hopefully when we break down the conversation to that level, they can begin to appreciate. Now, when you go to church and we are given to support the work of the church or the work of God, there are various means by which we give the monies. One, we could say offering time, people respond, blessing time, and all those stuff. We put a bowl right in front. We all get up from your seats. You dance around the bowl. You put the money in. That is one way of giving to the church. Another way of giving to the church is that we give tithes. So in my church, for instance, we have books where you write how much tithe you're giving based on the income that you earn. Once again, the complexity of what is income, but I wouldn't bore you at this stage of what income is. Okay? So if you don't earn, you don't pay that tithe. And then the last one is that from time to time, we do what is called harvests. So the church will say we are having an annual harvest. When we do that harvest, in the old time, and I like using that example, in the old time, people will bring plantain, tuber of yams into the church, and then we'll do auction. So somebody will say, give me a price. You say 10 cedis. Then somebody will say 12 cedis. Then we keep going. 20 cedis. Nobody says 1, 2, 3. We ring the bell. And then the person who mentioned the highest pays.
Yeah.
So I'm giving you 3 ways, 3 examples by which we give in church. And
So
I'm going to align that.
Tithe and then auction.
An auction. I'm going to align that to the various baskets of taxes that we also have in Ghana. So if I start with offering, usually if somebody doesn't have offering to give or doesn't pass the money to somebody, the person would not be in front to put the money in. So what do you see? You put in that money when you get in front there. All right? So I would align that to the taxes that we classify as international trade taxes in Ghana. So that's the first basket. And always think about this as your offering. You get up. I'm not talking about the one that they pass, but the one that you get up, you go in front, you put it in, you come back to your seat. So if you don't get to that place where they put it in, you may not pay the offerings. Are you with me? Then the second one is a tithe. You earn, and as a percentage of what you earn, you give. We have a basket or a category of taxes in Ghana called taxes on income and property. So I've told you international trade.
Yes.
Go round. So if you don't go around a place, you don't pay. I've told you about income-based amounts, which is like the tithes. And then the third one, which is the auction. If you don't say some, if you don't want to buy the thing to consume, you don't pay. So we have the taxes on goods and services. Now,
That
Once
is like
again,
the VAT, which is
brilliant.
the consumption
So
tax.
I have restrained myself from getting
Yes.
technical so that people can follow the conversation, understand, and engage. It is only when you get people to begin to appreciate that you can build them together to build a kind of country you and I will be very proud of. All right. So to summarize, you've asked, what are the various kinds of taxes? I have attacked this or addressed this from a religious perspective in a way to tell you that there are three main categories. In the same vein, when you pick up the national budget of Ghana and you turn to the appendix, you will see these three categories I'm talking about. Taxes on income and property, which is based on the income that you earn. Taxes on goods and services, like the auction, which you have now gotten me to drag me into the world of VAT, and I'll come there. And then the last one, taxes on international trade. All right? So those are the three categories. Now, if I get technical, you'll recall that when you asked me about how taxes are defined, I began the conversation by looking at the whole idea that we have a public good, a public service that we all believe we must contribute towards financing it. That means of financing it is a means of tax. Then I elevated the conversation to say, permit me to be a little bit technical, to tell you that our laws say that if that thing that we want to collect is prescribed in a tax law and is administered by the Commissioner General, who is like the CEO of the GRA, actually, who is not like, who is the CEO of the GRA, then you call that a tax. Now we've moved on to talk about the categories. So in addressing your question on the types of taxes, I have addressed it by looking at the three broad categories. But then if you go back to the definition, we have laws for each of these. So since you dragged me into the VAT world, we have a law for VAT. We have a law for income tax. We have a law for crossing, which is the customs law, amongst others. So based on what you want to explore, I would attempt to break it down further for our audience to be able to follow the conversation.
VAT, personal income tax, corporate tax, what do they mean?
All right. So once again, we are having a conversation, and I'm going to take you along that journey. So the three categories, I will order it as follows: taxes on income and property, taxes on goods and services, taxes on international trade. So you talked about personal income tax. You've talked about corporate income tax. The name of the tax gives
There is one. I should let me just chip in. Withholding tax.
I would address that too.
Okay.
There is the corporate income tax you've mentioned. There is the personal income tax you've mentioned. All these taxes that you've mentioned, their name even gives them up. Income taxes. So this will fall into my first category of taxes on what? Income and property.
Okay.
All right. Then you mentioned VAT. VAT and its brothers. So yesterday Liverpool won, or Liverpool is going to carry the trophy, the Premier League. All right. Liverpool says, I do not work alone. In the same vein, VAT in Ghana does not work alone. It works with three brothers I'll come back to deal with. But based on this conversation we've had, Sule, clearly VAT and its brothers find its way into the second category of taxes on what? Goods and services. And then the last one, which are international trade taxes or international cross-border taxes, as I love to call them, would include things like custom duties. So you recall that our current president, during the campaign last year or last 2 years, picked up a bill of entry, some call it custom declaration, and outlined a number of taxes. Those taxes wouldn't have come up but for people who chose to bring in things from abroad into Ghana. If it was a domestic purchase, those things will not come in. So hopefully our audience get to appreciate these three categories. Now, having put your questions once again within these three categories of mine, which I keep going back so our audience can follow, I would move on to address issues of personal income tax and issues of corporate income tax. Once again, I said their name gives them up. Their names means that their categorization is like tithes. It is usually based on income. But recall that I mentioned that income has its own technical definition, which we'll come back to. Now, Sule, starting with the personal income tax, personal income tax, then corporate income tax. The question is, what are these two different income taxes? God ensures that human beings procreate. When you procreate, you give birth to another human being with life, with blood. Taxes or income taxes, that is the responsibility of persons with blood, is personal income tax. Under the law, we can create persons. So whenever the tax law talks about a person, and I'll further break it down so you can appreciate where I'm going on with this. Whenever the tax law talks about a person, that person is not necessarily somebody with what? Flesh and blood. It also includes persons that came into being by virtue of a law. So let me pick Graphic Communications. Your name is Graphic Communications Limited or Group. It is a person. As a result,
created by statute,
created by law. If somebody feels that they have been offended by Graphic, they can sue Graphic. If Graphic also feels somebody has offended them, the person can also sue. But where is Graphic? Go and call Graphic for me. You cannot call Graphic for me. Graphic is led by its board, the employees in there. But there is a creature called Graphic. So if you're talking about personal income tax, simple takeaway point is that this is a tax whose responsibility is focused on people with what? Flesh and blood. Whilst when you talk about corporate income tax, we are saying that you don't have flesh and blood. God did not breathe into you to become a living being. Your living being status was created by law. So you go to the office of the Registrar of Companies. They set you up. They give you a birth certificate. So you become an entity in your own. And then you also have to incur corporate income tax. So breaking it down, you could have heard, oh, the companies, they are not paying tax. The company is not a human being. But they are not paying tax means that they expect that when they pick a corporate entity, that corporate entity should be paying tax. In some jurisdictions, you may not necessarily have that. So the shareholders of the company are the people who have the things distributed for them, and then they end up paying the tax. So in brief, takeaway point is that under the tax laws, it is persons that are mandated to pay tax. Those persons can be persons with life, blood, flesh.
It's the same as PSUN.
Very good. So I'll address that very soon. Those persons with life, blood, and whatever, they are personal income tax people. And then companies are also seen as persons. They can sue. They can be sued. We expect that if they make income, unless there's an exception, they also have to pay tax. That tax in there is called corporate income tax. Without being technical, there are persons between these two who may also be seen as entities, but they don't necessarily pay tax on their own accord. And let me break it down. You and I decide to say that let's form a partnership. We set up a partnership to do business. That partnership earns some form of income. If that income is not subject to the special rules, and I'm not going to bore people with the special rules, we have to take that income.
Maybe you can just mention it.
All right.
So that at least
all right. I would have to take that income of that partnership and then allocate it to the partners. And then the partners end up paying their personal income tax. So I've drawn a distinction between, say, partnerships and companies, although you may classify all of them as entities. All right? Then you ask the question around withholding tax.
Yes.
Then you brought in PAYE. PAYE, in my view, and I'll explain why, is a type of withholding tax. In essence, what it's basically saying is that graphic communications, when you are paying Sule, take a portion of Sule's amount and bring it to me. So as you pay Sule and Sule ends, Sule should pay tax. So that's the pay as you earn. And let me break it down. Companies, for instance, graphic communication, if it doesn't have a special exemption, it's required to pay tax on quarterly basis. So let's assume, for simplicity's sake, the accounting period for graphic is January to December. So just like the way you celebrate your birthday, companies also celebrate their birthdays, all right? January to December. The GRA Commissioner General is not in graphic. The GRA Commissioner General must know what is happening to be able to administer the taxes. So at the beginning of the year, latest by the end of the first quarter, graphic will have to tell GRA, oh, GRA, for 2024, and let's assume we're in 2024, oh, GRA, this is how much I expect to pay for taxes for this year, 2024.
Okay.
On that basis, graphic would present a certain document to GRA, telling GRA, oh, GRA, I expect to pay 100 Ghana cedis this year. In a year, how many quarters do we have? 4. So remember I said typically, companies will pay taxes on quarterly basis. So the first quarter, assuming graphic has January to December accounting year, the first quarter will end in March, the second quarter in June, the third quarter in September, and the last quarter in December. So this is how graphic will be expected to pay its taxes as it goes on, with some adjustment done here and there. But when I come to Sule as an employee, we do not wait for Sule to collect his money and go to jail to pay. Maybe the money will never get there. So what we do is that graphic, as you pay Sule, withhold. So we call it pay as you earn. So I hope that clarifies.
Yes.
But it is a form of withholding tax.
Okay.
Because you're telling the person who is paying to withhold. One of the points that we all need to know is that Ghana's withholding tax regime is now made up of 2 main categories of withholding tax. The first category is what I've been trying to describe to you, where you are paying somebody, you believe what that person is getting is their income, and so you withhold.
What percentage would that be?
All right. The withholding percentage really depends on who you are paying, what you are paying. So let's assume that there is no foreign country. Let's assume that Bibiani, Ghana, everywhere is in Ghana. Let's assume that Ghana is the only country in this world. Remember, I've already talked about the fact that PAYE is a form of withholding. In Ghana, if you are resident here, you are not resident anywhere, your rate ranges generally from 0 to 35. So your employer needs to sit down, check how much you earn, and withhold accordingly from 0 to 35. So if you're asking what is the withholding tax rate, the withholding tax rate could go all the way up to 35%. Yes, don't worry. You earn income and over
It's scary.
It's scary.
It's scary as to how I can lose 35% of my
problem.
hard-earned money to the state.
All right. So it is up to 35. So you prove that. So I would come back and address it. Then the other forms of withholding tax. Once again, you'll recall that I said it depends on what you are paying for, who you are paying to. But broadly, payments that you are making would most likely fall in one of 3 categories other than that of employees. And the 3 categories are payment for goods, payment for services, and payment for works. But remember, I use the phrase generally. So there could even be payment for investment returns. So you've invested in a company. How did you invest? Do you give them a loan, or you invested by way of equity? And they are paying you, there could be a withholding tax that applies. But let's take, for the purpose of our audience, these three broad categories: for goods, for services, and then for works. When you are paying people for goods and there are no exceptions, you withhold 3%. If you are paying people for works, so you've got a carpenter, he's nailing some things here and there, we call it works, you withhold 5%. And if you are paying for general services, you withhold at 7.5%. These payments do not generally mean that that is the only tax the person should pay. So for instance, by the end of this month, 30th April 2025, people that earn income for the year 2024 are expected to complete a return, file the return usually through a GRA portal on the internet, and tell Mr. Commissioner General, God blessed me with life in 2024. I got some money. This is the money I am reporting to you, and this is my consequent taxes. So the withholding tax that people would have deducted from you, you can use that to deduct the amount of tax that you need to pay to the government of Ghana. If you've underpaid, you top up. If you've underpaid, you write a letter and you collect your money back. So let me pause here for you to address. But the key point is, recall, I said, when you talk about withholding tax in Ghana, you should be thinking of two broad categories. Everything I've described so far is withholding tax on income. There is also withholding tax on VAT. So let me quickly explain that, and then we can explore further. It got to a point in our life as a country, we thought we needed to address VAT fraud. What is VAT fraud? Sule does work for me. I tell Sule, I would only deal with people that are VAT registered. How do I know that Sule is VAT registered? He must be giving me a VAT invoice. When I buy from him. I have a policy that I only deal with people who are VAT registered and can give me VAT invoices. Sule says, Abeku, I like your business. So even though he doesn't have a VAT invoice, he goes to the next shop. Oko, mame, VAT invoice, when I'm going to project. The person gives him the money. That document is a value document. Sule collects the money plus VAT and doesn't remit the money to the government of Ghana. Because he's not even registered. And he's going to collect from Co and collected the money. So what did the government do? The government says that, okay, to address some of this VAT fraud and the various non-compliances, when Sule invoices me and I am a designated, remember when I was talking about graphic, I didn't use the word designated, I only said an employer. For VAT, you must be specifically designated. If I am a designated VAT withholding agent or withholding VAT agent, what I need to do is that when I am paying Sule, I will withhold 7%. So that if Sule even gets the remaining and it doesn't send it to the GRA, at least the state has gotten 7% out of the total VAT that would have potentially been lost. So Sule, going forward, anytime somebody says withholding tax, we need to ask a fundamental question. Are you talking about withholding income tax or are you talking about withholding VAT? With withholding income tax, you are not appointed specifically. The law appoints you automatically. That whenever you are paying somebody and you meet certain conditions, and I said there were certain exceptions, you don't fall, you would have to withhold. Whilst for the withholding VAT, you must be specifically appointed. And when people invoice you and certain conditions are met, you withhold 7%. So in brief, we've talked about corporate income tax, we've talked about personal income tax, we've put both of them under the category of taxes on income and property, which in my church example, it is like the tithe because they are based on income. But so far, I've not defined income.
No, you haven't.
All right. Then we moved on to talk about...
Maybe you can use this opportunity to define income.
Okay. Income can be complicated, but let me break it down for the average man. So like you decide to plant a mango tree in your house, okay? And the mango tree now fruits, okay? If the mango season passes, the mango will go. The next season, it will come, but the tree is still there. The tax law is not seeking to tax the tree when it comes to income. They are seeking to tax the fruits of it. So are you with me?
Yes.
So anytime you are talking about taxes on income, you are seeking to tax the fruits and not the capital itself. So I set up a business. Okay? I buy machinery. I buy laptops. People come and buy my products. Taxes on income is the taxes that is paid on the income. So how much did I get? How much did I spend? The difference will usually give you income. But the technicality is that how much I spent, the law is not going to give you a total deduction for each year for the total cost of the tree. They will only give you a part of the cost because they are saying that the benefit from the tree is long term.
Okay.
So do you get it now?
Yes.
So whenever we talk about the income, broadly, there are exceptions. I keep saying broadly because the tax law has so many exceptions. Broadly, whenever you talk about income, look at it as the fruits of your labor. However, we allow you to take some deduction for the costs. So if I pick graphic sells newspapers, but graphic has employees. Graphic pays for electricity. So graphics income for tax purposes is what it gets from its newspapers, etc., less what it incurs. Simplicity, pick a financial statement. Open to the income statement of graphic. Look at the number they write, their profits before tax. That is typically income. But there are so many adjustments that a taxman does. Because the taxman sometimes will disagree with the accountant. And the tax law doesn't imbibe directly everything the accountant have done. But I don't want to get into those technicalities so your audience can follow this conversation. And as we build the knowledge, we can then get a little bit more technical.
So how are some companies able to withhold tax?
Yes.
When some companies are not able to withhold tax?
That's a very good question. So let's get practical again. You asked me to go to Makola Market. Under the law, if what I am going to buy generally does not exceed 2,000 Ghana cedis, you don't apply withholding. Okay? But I go to the market and I'm going to buy things worth 5,000. The market woman may not understand. She will not understand. Of course, the Ghana card now should be a personal tax identification number. But she would not understand. So she's going to give you troubles. So it is either, for tax purposes, you gross up, so when GRA comes, you don't get into trouble, or otherwise. So some of the reasons why some are able to withhold, some are not able to withhold, is sometimes the practicalities of it. I go to a shell shop, for instance. I buy something, I pay with my Visa card. How do I withhold? So for me, the more formalized, the more technologically advanced we become as a country, we need to review our withholding regime. Because look at the practicality. I'm going to refuel my car. Boss, how much? Oh, 500. How are you paying? POS. That's where I buy all the time. Definitely, I may exceed 2,000. How do you withhold? Those are complexities. But on the side of the revenue, on the side of government, our economy is largely informal.
Exactly. That brings me to our next question.
Yes.
It appears I mean, for the payment of taxes, it's only those in the formal sector
Okay.
that pay taxes, and we see less of those in the informal sector.
All right.
And some arguments say they earn even sometimes more than those in the formal
Okay,
sector.
that's a very good one. So I think earlier this year, there was a data released or information released by the Ghana Statistical Service, which placed the economy of Ghana by saying that we have, I think it was about 92% informal. So I agree with you when people say, oh, we have a large informal sector and they don't pay tax. But based on the conversation we've had today, surely you agree that we don't just say you don't pay tax. We need to ask which category are we talking about. So are we saying that they don't pay income tax?
Yeah.
Is that what we are saying? Because when they import,
This will apply to income tax.
brilliant. So that's why I want us to elevate the conversation now. So when you say that those in the informal sector are not paying, I'm saying, hold on. The guy who may be with Guta imports. When they get to the port, they pay.
Yeah.
So it's like paying offering, but maybe not paying tithe. That's the conversation.
Okay.
So it is not the case that they don't pay. Secondly, when you go to places to eat, it is Christmas Day, it is Easter. I'm in the informal sector, no doubt. But I took out my family to go and eat. The invoice or the bill that I got included taxes. So I want us to elevate a conversation that I think that when people say they don't pay tax, the category now that we put them in three main categories, their main concern a lot is that they do not pay income tax. Maybe on assessment, maybe people withheld on them. So whenever we say they don't pay, maybe we are focusing on the income tax by assessment as against by withholding. Because some of them, they cannot escape the withholding. They withhold on them. All right? When they go out to eat, they incur. Maybe the other bit where people say they don't pay tax would be on the registration for VAT. So let me use the opportunity to address VAT. So have you ever wondered why when you buy a gum in traffic from the people that sell gum or ice water, you don't pay VAT there? But when you go to the mall to buy gum, you look at it, you pay VAT. Have you ever asked why? The reason is simple. So there is costs in administering taxes. So let me even pick GRA. GRA has a commissioner general. They have commissioners. They have employees. Each of them, just like people in graphic, are paid. So there is cost incurred in administering the taxes. Is it everybody that they can chase? You would even tell them that. No. Put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
Right? So it is not everybody you can chase. So because of that, we have a registration threshold for VAT. Basically, we are saying that if you don't do business up to this level, please don't come and disturb us. Please don't register for VAT. So when people are saying that those in the informal sector are not paying tax, is it because those people have met the VAT registration threshold and have not applied to register for VAT? Or it is, which case are we talking about? Indeed, some of them would have met it and not done that. And let me quickly chip in. The VAT registration threshold in Ghana is currently 200,000 over a 12-month period. And I like breaking the things down. 200,000 translates roughly into 20,000 cedis a month, correct?
Yes.
So if it's 20,000 cedis a month, help me break it. How much would it be per week?
I mean, 20,000
divided by 4 gives us 5,000.
5,000, yeah.
Now let's break it down into a working day. 5,000 divided by 5 also gives us how much? 1,000.
Yes.
So the 200,000, which is the general VAT registration threshold, roughly on a monthly basis is 20,000. Roughly on a weekly basis is 5,000. Roughly on a daily working basis is 1,000. Are you with me now?
Yeah.
Now, Sule, pick your woman that we go and buy the wache from or the kinky from. Look at a heap of wache. And look at the one you buy in your small polythene bag. Are you sure they're not going to sell more than 1,000 a day?
Yeah.
They would probably sell more than 1,000 a day. So when people say they don't pay tax, is it a case that they expected them to have charged them the VAT? Maybe. Could it also be the case that this 200,000 is not even realistic today? And my view is that I don't think it's that realistic today. Because we've had this 200,000 as the VAT registration threshold for close to a decade, for about a decade. We know, Sule, that as time passes, inflation comes in.
True.
The exchange rate comes in. What was the exchange rate of the cedi about 10 years ago? That was about 4 cedis to a dollar. Now it's about, depending on where you look at, 14, 15, or 16 cedis. Should I you with me?
Yes.
So if we say the informal sector people are not paying tax, my view, let us zoom in and ask, which taxes are they not paying? Is it the income tax that they are not paying properly? Is it the VAT that they are not properly registered? Or even when they are registered, are they not charging VAT properly, using a VAT invoice, etc., etc.? So let me pause here for you to bring in an additional question that you have.
Very interesting discussion. I mean, time, they are signaling me that time is running. But I just want you to clarify this for me.
Okay.
Tax avoidance and tax evasion.
All right.
One is legal, I'm told. One is not. One is illegal.
Okay.
So how come avoidance and evasion?
All right.
That should have summed up all illegal.
Okay.
But it does appear that one, I mean, the law doesn't get you.
Okay.
But for the other, you are under the grip of the law.
Okay.
What's the difference?
All right. So, Sule, I will start once again by the ordinary man distinction. And then I will elevate it into the legal distinctions. All right?
Okay.
Sule, can you force me to work?
No?
So if the law says that when you work and you earn income, you would pay taxes. Somebody can choose not to work. And somebody may choose to define that as a tax avoidance. How do you punish that particular person? Then somebody would work and then hide the money. So for example, the thing is selling for 20,000. The person knows that when they declare the 20,000 on their invoice, the GRA will catch them and they will pay full VAT. So they leave 10 out and charge you 2,000 and keep the 18,000 of the records. What have they done? They have sought to deceive. And deception is a crime. Should I you with me now?
Yes.
Deception is a crime. So tax evasion means that you are committing a criminal offense associated with taxes. Keep truthful records. You kept records that are fraudulent. Because you have kept fraudulent records, that is a crime. Whilst with tax avoidance, you chose to do things that does not even bring up the tax liability. Now, having explained this ordinary man base, Sule, permit me to become a little bit more technical. To become a little bit more technical, in the tax laws, interestingly, what the tax law writes is that we have a category for tax avoidance.
Oh, interesting. I see.
Interesting, when you look at the tax law, you wouldn't find in this precise term tax evasion. What you rather have is tax avoidance. And that is broadly said that whenever you do things, and the key reason for which you were doing those things, Sule, was to reduce your taxes or even avoid your taxes, the commissioner can come in and reclassify your transactions.
Okay.
So let me give you an example. You hear that, when you provide meals to employees, the employee does not pay tax. So Sule said, okay, because I've seen this, my wife, my children, my grandparents, they all come to Graphic, they'll come and eat. Don't pay them. He does that to avoid the taxes. Because he see that, I can do this thing to suppress it. As you do those things to suppress it, if the Commissioner General feels that what you are doing is not necessarily criminal, because for something to be criminal, Sule, you must have it in a statute, and you must prescribe the punishment. And punishment could be by way of fine or imprisonment. If the tax law is not putting a burden on you by way of a fine or an imprisonment, and the Commissioner General believes that you've done certain things which he would reclassify. So you say, this income, it is business income. But the Commissioner says, no, it's an investment income. So he's reclassifying. anytime he reclassifies those things, he's doing it because he believes you were doing it to avoid the payment of the taxes. So, in brief, tax avoidance, tax evasion is all about the definitions.
Okay.
With the evasion, it is a crime. So the element of crime should be in there. If you are fraudulent, the state can actually sue you to say that you stole from us. So those things that are going to be prosecuted.
So what
by
are the
states,
consequences for tax evasion?
So many. So many. You could be jailed or you could be fined. But for tax avoidance, it may not necessarily lead to jailing a person and fining a person. However, it could lead to pecuniary things like interest. So Commissioner Senior says, the way you treated this thing, you've underpaid the taxes. So please come and pay the tax and interest. The payment of interest is not because you've committed a crime. So are we clear?
Yes.
So the evasion is crime. You must show the criminality of it. Did he deceive? Did he steal? So anything that you believe is a crime in society, having tax attached to it is tax evasion. Whilst with tax avoidance, I treated it in a certain way. The intention may not to commit a crime.
Yeah.
But the Commissioner General can say that, Sule, because of the way you treated this, I believe your tax is not properly calculated. So I am recalculating it and imposing you with interest. I hope the difference is now clear.
It's very clear.
All right.
Abeku, I don't know whether this is related, but once I have you, you can clarify it for me. Why do some companies or some organizations close their financial year in September?
That's a good one.
Whilst others will say, okay, September is the third quarter.
Yes.
And others will wait for the fourth quarter before going into the next year, before they close their financial year.
So that's a very good question. So many things determines when you choose to close your financial year. So for example, somebody could choose September because the planting season or the harvesting season ends in September. So they believe that choosing that date would give a proper reflection of their activities over the year. So everyone would have a year, just as some people may, as you said, close in September, others will close in December, others may even close in June.
Yeah.
Another reason could be that the country, the parent country, may have a different date, which is different from the typical December that you have in Ghana. So I am from
That's
Morocco.
what normally pertains in most of the multinational companies.
Brilliant. So the company already exists somewhere. It has a deadline or an accounting period of September. They come to set up in Ghana. They want to be able to consolidate their books properly. So the Ghanaian entity also follows by adapting the date of the parent entity.
Does it have any implication for the tax system?
That's a very good question. When it comes to taxing income, you remember, Sule, you led me into the world of personal income tax and corporate income tax. With personal income tax, you cannot choose your accounting period. So personal income people like you and I with blood and skin, our period is from January to December. However, the law allows companies to adopt their accounting period as the basis period.
Okay.
So whenever you hear basis period, the basis period is over the period where we determine your tax. So are we clear?
Yeah.
So the law allows it to be done. So you can just use your year period and then that would then determine your tax. Can it have an impact on tax? It is believed that what happens in September this year, hopefully will repeat itself September next year. That is why in Ghana, we can even predict that, this is a rainy season, this is a dry season. So much as there could be some differences here and there, because the cycle is maintained, we hope that what was not captured previously will now be captured. Of course, sometimes it may bring up some complexities. Because while majority are doing December, you may be doing September or June, and it may bring up some complexities. But the authorities and their staff, hopefully, and I believe, have the appropriate staff to be able to address that issue. So it shouldn't be too much of a point of concern. However, some people can actually begin to change it to influence their taxes. And because of that, if you want to change anything, you must write to the GRA.
Okay.
So your financial year end was, say, December. Now you want to change it to June. So you need to pick up a pen and paper. Dear Mr. Commissioner General, for the following reasons, A, B, C, and D, please grant me, I wish to notify you of my change. And then the GRA is also very much informed.
When is the last day for the payment of taxes?
All right. So I'll take you back again. You remember I said graphic. Assuming he has a financial year end from January to December, would pay taxes on quarterly basis.
Yes.
Okay? As a company, you need to give time for you to prepare your accounts and then file the returns. The last day for filing your return is 4 months from the end of your financial year. So if you have a December year end, it means that by 30th April, you should be filing. However, Sule, life does not always give us what we want. So sometimes there may be the need for you to request for an extension of time.
Okay.
And under the law, you can write, Dear Commissioner General, due to reasons A, B, C, and D, I cannot meet your 30th April deadline. Please extend it for me. And the law says that the Commissioner General has powers to extend it, but his extension cannot ordinarily go beyond 2 months. But to be very precise, you can go beyond 60 days. Do you get it? However, Sule, some people can also say that, oh, because I have the extension, they can just apply and get extension. The law says that even if I grant you an extension of time to file, it doesn't affect the time you pay your taxes. So remember graphic, I told you, would file an estimate, pay on quarterly basis, but because they were estimates, there could be a difference, correct? Because anytime you say there's an estimate, you are estimating, there could be a difference. So that difference must be paid by the end of the time you are filing your return, which in this case, for a December company, I said 4 months, so to take it to April. So you must be paying. So if you don't pay it now, the Commissioner General will say, no problem, Sule. I give you the extension, but it doesn't affect your time of payment.
So if you don't write to the Commissioner General by Wednesday for extension, what happens?
So if you don't write by Wednesday for extension, first you incur a penalty
for
late filing. Because you are saying that Commissioner says, I need this information. I need to report to Finance Minister by telling him, oh, these are the people who have filed. This is the amount of money I'm expecting, etc., etc. So you've denied the state that information. So the state says, you pay me 500 cedis for not filing by 30th. And then each additional day, you pay me 10 Ghana cedis. Should I with me?
Yes.
You pay me 10 Ghana cedis for each additional day that you do not file. But then that is for the filing, that is for the document. If in addition to the filing you do not pay, the state says no problem. You could have gone to the bank to take an interest, to take a loan at an interest to pay me. Or because you didn't pay me, the state, I had to go and take loan, maybe TBs, maybe from banks, from whatever. I have incurred interest. So because you failed to pay me by the deadline, you pay interest. And the interest that the state will charge you is the Bank of Ghana monetary policy rate, jacked up by 25%. So let me bring it up. Recently, the Bank of Ghana met. They prescribed, do you remember the rate?
27.
Okay, so it's gone up 28.
28 okay. By 100 basis points.
Yes, 28.
Yeah.
28, a quarter of 28 gives me 7. Correct?
Yes.
So whilst the MPC is at 28, you will pay 35% to the state. Because they will add a quarter to, because the state says that typically when you go to the bank will not give you a loan at MPC rate. Right?
I mean, they have to add their margins.
They'll add their margin. So the state is also adding its margin. And its margin is 25% above that. So whilst MPC is 28, the state says So you didn't pay me, not a problem at all. You pay me at interest of 35.
But Abeku, the problem for most organizations, and I don't know how the GRA handles it, if you don't have an efficient and reliable bookkeeping records, I mean, how do you? I mean, that is an inadequacy on the part of the company. Correct. How does the GRA navigate all of this to ensure that those taxes you pay are correct?
So that's a very good question. And sometimes what I say is that when you are getting into the world of doing business, you must understand the complexities that come with it. So for example, if you decide to set up a limited liability company, so do you know what that limited by your name means? What it means is that if Sule fails not to do the right thing, ordinarily, if the company goes down, all that I can get is the shares in Sule's company. Unless Sule has been shown to be trading fraudulently and all those sort of things, I cannot even come and take your personal properties because you have added the name limited to your company. So that is why the ORC, the Office of Registrar of Companies, would require you to file a return. Because the moment you said you want us to limit your liability, you must be public. So keeping proper books of record, especially for companies, is non-negotiable. And that is why even if you're going to set up a company, the ORC will ask you, typically, to give them who your auditors would be. Because your auditors should come and check the records. So are you with me?
Yes.
So keeping records for your business is non-negotiable. Now, if you don't do it, basically what I tell people is that you have actually opened yourself into the GRA's mouth. If you are the GRA, what would you do? The person has not kept records. You would have to use your best estimate. And your best estimate can be so painful than what the person would have actually incurred. And the truth of the matter is that a number of businesses may not keep proper books of records. Sule, correct?
Yes.
So what you find is that whilst they can trace their income, they may not be able to trace their expenses properly. The transportation to work, the transportation to bring things to may not be done properly. So if you now leave the GRA alone and they can get evidence of your sale, they may give you some small margin and then they will tax you. So in line with your question, I would really encourage audience that yes, having an accounting package may come at an extra cost. Personally, it will save you from so much problems, especially with the GRA.
Indeed.
Because you've put the GRA in a very difficult stance to determine what your income is or what your income should be. So keeping records is non-negotiable. It's actually required by law. The law actually requires you to keep the records.
Thank you so much, Abeku.
You're welcome, Sule.
Viewers, all too soon our time is up. We hope you've picked a line or two from this conversation. This is Time with PwC. And we hope to come your way again another time. Until then, it's bye for now.
For more news, please visit our website, graphic.com.gh, or follow us on Facebook at Daily Graphic and on YouTube and Twitter at GraphicGH.
Subscribe now.